Well, let's get to our first topic of discussion this afternoon. Nigeria and France have agreed to develop joint projects to promote and diversify the critical minerals value chain in the solid mineral sector of both countries. The West African nation has said this, that these critical minerals are part of it are like copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and rare earth materials, and which are essential to clean energy technologies. A statement signed by Mr. Segun Tomori, the Special Assistant on Media to Minister of Solid Minerals, Dr. Dele Alake. In the Memorandum of Understanding, he explained that both countries on the sidelines of the visit to France by President Bola Tinubu agreed to collaborate on research, training, and Franco-Nigeria student exchanges for knowledge and skills transfer. A key component of the MOU, the ministry said, is the promotion of sustainable mining activities by executing projects and programs that reduce the environmental impact of mining on carbon emissions, water consumption, and climate change. Dr. Tokwe Fashua is the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs, Office of the Vice President. He joins me live from our Abuja studios to look at the expected implications of some of these agreements reached at this trip and some other economic issues. Dr. Fashua, good afternoon. It's really good to see you.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Yes, it's been a while.
Yes, it's really been a while. And it's good to start. I know there's been a series of trips before now, and I've monitored some of them. And one thing is clear, the message of Nigeria is open to business is what the president has been talking about. But specifically, what would you say about this recent trip to France and maybe other ones you would mention? How are we strengthening ties with our foreign partners?
All right, thank you very much. You know that France is one of the G7, G8 nations, is one of the largest economies in the world as well. And in terms of geopolitical reach, indeed, the other time I was checking, there are more Francophone countries in Africa than there are Anglophones or those who speak Spanish or Portuguese or what have you. You know, so in those days, it used to be that France actually even preceded the British people in reaching out to the rest of the world. And for one, you can see very strategically that Nigeria is surrounded by Francophone countries, perhaps almost on all sides apart from the sea. And so the visit of the president is very strategic. You know, he has gone there to do the needful. It was a state visit proper, with all the carpets, the red carpets rolled out, all the respect that there is was accorded to our president. I think we should be proud of that. And on the side of that, they have also reached some very good agreements in the business area, from solid minerals, as you mentioned, to renewable energy, to agriculture, and what have you. And of course, I think the principal one is also that on the side of that, there'll be some agreements reached in terms of security, land security, border security, and all of that, where the French government is also very, very strong. So it's a good one. Nigeria, of course, needs to continue to reach out, and the president has shown from the get-go that, look, I'm open for business, we're ready to roll, and anybody that invests in this country, your investment is assured, taking back your money when you want to, nobody's going to stop you, and all of that. And I think that, you know, we're going to turn the corner, if you ask me. By 2025, it's going to be a year of very pleasant surprises for the economy and for Nigerians.
We're going to get there, but I'm also interested in training, knowledge transfer, and all of that, technological advancement. How are we also keen into this, considering visits like this? The president has moved to South Africa today, another meeting tomorrow with Ramaphosa. But what's your take around that? Right.
You know, like I said earlier, France is one of the most developed countries in the world. You can't take that away from them. As a matter of fact, France, EDF, the company called EDF, it's a French company, you know, assists Britain, Great Britain with quite a bit of its energy needs. France is a nuclear country, and of course, they've been around for a bit. They have a long history behind, under their belts, if you ask me. And Therefore, we need to keep learning from such a country. So it's a great one that agreements have been reached over knowledge transfer, over education, and all of that. One thing I'll quickly admonish, though, is that when I travel West Africa and even some other parts of Africa, I realize that the Francophone speaking countries, they, as a matter of routine, they also speak English. But many Nigerians, we only speak English without picking up the French. I think that an indication of this is that we also need, in order to maximize some of these, we also need to begin to tend towards that multilingual kind of approach so that we can benefit from every country that has something to offer in terms of learning. And of course, like they say, you know, the only thing nobody can take away from you is what you have in between your ears, what you have in your brains. And so beyond all the investments that France could bring to this country, more knowledge, more technology, acquisition of those capabilities, if you like, is even much more important and much more valuable. So it's a good thing to look forward to, and we thank them for that. But of course, it's also left to Nigerians, especially young Nigerians, to capitalize on some of these things so that when they come, we're not left you know, wanting, and we maximize the advantages that may come with them.
Interesting stuff. Now let's bring it back home, and when we talk about the ongoing reforms, and basically it's two, many of us know about it: subsidy removal and the liberalization of the foreign exchange market. And these are two key issues or reforms that analysts have talked about for a long while, and even we've had this discussion even before you got into office. But my question to you now would be the present state of the economy. You just talked about 2025 being the turning point. We know what Nigerians are facing at the moment, talking about hike in the price of fuel, food, which is the highest part of inflation. It's worrisome. Inflation is at 33.88%. A GDP growth rate came up last week, pretty better than what we used to have. It's fair, like it seems like these reforms are yielding some positives. But I want your understanding. It's been a while we talked about the reforms and the implications and where we are headed. Can you take us through the understanding of where we are at the moment? We've seen in-house production, Dangote refinery, Port Harcourt refinery coming on stream, and all of that. Highlight the positives you see as we move on, Dr. Fashua.
Thank you very much. Let me probably start from the fuel subsidy removal, you know, which led to increases in prices of fuel from what it used to be. Yes, admittedly, very painful to Nigerians and kind of hurts a lot of people's pockets, myself inclusive, everybody working in government inclusive. But the corollary to that is that that is also catalytic to the coming on board of companies like Dangote refinery. Last week we saw some activity around the Port Harcourt refinery, at least the old Port Harcourt refinery. Everybody is on the double and everybody is under pressure to deliver. Now the narrative has changed from Nigeria being a major petroleum importing country to we are now talking about local production between Dangote refinery, if you like, Port Harcourt refinery, and the modular refinery. We're now talking about local production and even export to other parts of the world, especially through Dangote refinery. Of course, that project is a massive, major project, which not only has a national implication, but even implications around the world. The other time I was seeing a refinery in Scotland that closed down. I think another one down in Rotterdam, if I'm not mistaken. And so this has implication for us. That's one of the tectonic shifts that we're seeing in the economy going forward, that we're no longer just sitting down. Look, in the past, we imported about $25 billion to $30 billion worth of petroleum and diesel and all some of those other things, jet A1 fuel and what have you. But now the story is changing. And I believe that after all of this initial hiccups and back and forth, we're going to even see a lot more development. Not to talk about the number of people that such projects are going to employ, whether directly or indirectly. Perhaps we're talking about a provision of close to 1 million jobs directly and indirectly as a result of that development of that facility in Nigeria. That's very remarkable. Now, Nigerians, we usually don't talk much about that. And people who are benefiting from policies hardly speak up in Nigeria, you know, unfortunately. Well, it's also on our part. We in government are going to continue to highlight some of those things because people are actually benefiting from some of these policies that's going on. Regarding the Naira, now, also another very interesting thing, and these are very important tectonic, if you like, reforms. Now, what that has done really is that it has changed a lot of things behaviorally. So yes, many Nigerians can't travel as often as they would before, as they used to, you know, when they would have a lot of leisurely travel around the world and all of that. You know, we're now looking more at home. A lot of people are now having to buy local things. And then again, statistically, Manufacturing Association of Nigeria about 2 weeks ago released a report that, you know, investment in manufacturing has gone up by 32.6%. And even just now, this afternoon, I was seeing in the Vanguard that, you know, export of manufactured goods has gone up by 118% in the last 1 year. And thirdly, that a lot of manufacturing companies are also now looking inwards for the raw materials that they used to import. So I think what we probably have to do is observe this over the next year or two and see if indeed something great hasn't been done. I think that the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has been valiant. It's not been easy to stick to one's guns and say, listen, this is what we need to do and this is what must be done. Of course, that you know that the President is not looking at just the short term, but is looking at the long term, so that it will be said that when he came in, he did the right thing that needed to be done. He dared to tread where angels even dared, you know, feared to tread in terms of repositioning this economy. And I think that's it. You know, so perhaps one more information is that export has grown, especially non-oil export. If you look at the last GDP report by the MBS, Bureau for Statistics, you see that it's driven by non-oil export to a large extent. Beyond even the contribution of oil sector actually fell marginally, but non-oil picked up, and we're able to report 3.46%, which was even beyond what organizations like World Bank and IMF would have predicted for us. And I think that what we're even setting out to do is to defy some of those low growth projections and predictions. You can see in the 2025 budget, the Ministry of Budget and Planning, they're projecting about 6.4% growth. And I say, why not? You know, indeed, the goal and the vision of President Tinubu is to do, you know, very high, significant, inclusive growth that will result in better standards of living for every Nigerian. So I think we're on a good thing. We're actually, you know, on that threshold to break out of years of mediocrity in this country and reposition ourselves. But I would say that, you know, especially for young Nigerians who, unfortunately, you know, Nigeria is actually the largest consumer of social media in the world per capita. So we're glued to our social media. And of course, the bad thing about social media is that what you look for is what it gives to you. And once it gives you what you look for, it keeps on barraging you with all sorts of things that are similar to what you've always searched for. So if you're looking for bad news, you see bad news. If you're looking for good news, you see good news and more of good news. I think that we need to actively change that narrative and change that tendency for people to look for bad news and believe that Nigeria is on the way down, everything is coming down. It is not. There are many sectors that are now doing pretty well. Like I said before, export sector. I was in Kano just last week, seeing what some commodity traders are doing in this country. Even they're adding value. Now is the time. A lot of industries are now adding value rather than sending stuff out, you know, in raw form. Even the pharmaceutical sector. I was speaking to someone just on Saturday. There's a lot of contract manufacturing going on in Nigeria now, whereby some of the big brands are getting people to produce their product rather than importing from abroad. Hey, I mean, it's what we've always said and what we've always wanted. But the truth is that, look, change is always a very difficult scenario to manage. Most people don't like change. Most of us, if not all of us, will resist change one way or the other. But if we say we want a better Nigeria is a Nigeria where we produce the things that we need. And in fact, when I was researching on economic diversification some while ago, what you find out is that there's no definition of economic diversification in the textbook. There's no thing you're going to read and say this is how to diversify your economy. But what you can see is you can actually study economies that are diversified. Number one, diversified economy in the world, the economy of the United States of America. Number two, diversified economy of China. And if you look at those countries, they're very, very aggressive about producing the things that their people need, rather than packing their little resources and shipping abroad. So I think we're on a good thing, and thanks to the vision of the president and also the vice president supporting from the side. Thank you.
Well, true. I'm one of the fans of produce what you eat, and it gets to a point where we even have to start to the appetite for local goods, because that is impacting our currency. I totally agree with that, Dr. Fashua. Well, before we wrap up this segment of the conversation, top impediments or challenges, adequate power supply has been a challenge, insecurity, limited access to funding. These are issues that some Nigerians are looking forward to. Two in one question. And finally, what sort of interventions should Nigerians expect? Of course, there must be interventions when there are reforms like this one, the fallout of these reforms. There's been a series of interventions rolled out. What more should we be expecting moving forward?
Well, thank you. You talk about producing what we eat. It is not only what we eat. Of course, that's basic. Agriculture is basic, right? Whereas I used to argue that, look, agriculture cannot take us where we want to go to. But it is a sine qua non, it's a sine qua non to how we need to begin to move forward. If people don't eat, they can't comprehend any other thing. You can't tell them all sorts of highfalutin grammar and they will listen to you. So, however, we must produce the things that we eat in Nigeria and have excess. We still have a lot of arable land to cover, to open up, to plant. And the good thing about agriculture is that in 6 months you can actually begin to feel the impact. I know that the Minister of Agriculture has worked on about 200,000 hectares of land for wheat and for some other products. People need to go to the north. In Jigawa State, for example, massive amounts of lands have been cultivated further. Jigawa is very, very up there in agriculture. Equally, states like Kano, like Kebbi, let's talk of Niger, where the farmer governor is doing a yeoman's job, and I think that should be replicated all over the country. There are some states that look at agriculture as if this is not what we want to do. I was glad to see that Ekiti State, over the weekend, they even established an agri-product kind of processing company so that they will reduce incidences of post-harvest losses and what have you. So beyond what we eat is also what we use, including things, look at the basic needs, things like clothing, things like building materials, even cars. Remember that contrary to about 5-6 years ago, we now have about 5 companies that are either manufacturing or semi-manufacturing cars in Nigeria, with a lot of innovations coming on board. So look, we can't have enough of this. We can't have enough of this, especially if we want this country to stand on its 2 legs. Remember, like I said, diversification is actually about being able to stand on your own to a large extent. It may be taught wrongly in some other places to say, oh, just open up the borders and let anything come. Fair enough, but strategically, you must be able to capacitate your people to be able to produce the things that they need themselves to make them comfortable, and then you export the rest. Of course, Nigeria is now keyed into CFTA. A couple of months back, we exported, some items to Cameroon, to Algeria, to I think Morocco, and Uganda and Kenya. And these exports were not about merely raw materials. We were exporting things like SIM cards or these cards maybe for ATMs as well. We were exporting ceramics. We were exporting finished products in cosmetics and what have you. And I was very proud to see that. So we're on our way. Honestly speaking, of course, if we would break away from this circle of mediocrity that we have known for too long, we have to take this kind of hard decision. I think we have a leader who is ready to stand by this and say, look, this must be done at this point in time. So in terms of intervention, we can't have enough. We're still a developing country. I saw on the news just now that you read that Nigeria is now increasing the intervention to MSMEs to 5 million naira at 9% at the Bank of Industry. And I think there's a lot more of that coming up. I was just briefed this afternoon by one of my colleagues as well, who's in the MSME space, Tola Adekunle Johnson, that look, I mean, there's some good funds coming in that will really reposition the MSMEs and even, you know, take on quite a number of them and so on. So we can't do enough for the MSMEs. We're going to continue to do that to show. However, again, mind you, the government can have policies, but we need off-takers on this other side. We need valiant young Nigerians who will position and understand that this is where their destiny is. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this country. This is a developing country. It's a growing country. The people built those places that we run to abroad. You know, people build them, and your young people build them as well. We have all of our opportunities here and even more. And for those who feel stuck where they are, you know, this country is welcoming to everybody. Relocate and see what's going on the other side of the world. Don't get mired in the mud by the news that you see and what people say, that if you move out of your comfort zone, something is going to consume you. Nothing is consuming anybody in Nigeria. So whether it was on the area of security or in the area of intervention monetarily, or even in terms of, you know, distributing food to people who are really, really down on their luck, you know, because there are people like that who are vulnerable in this country, people who are living in, you know, IDP zones and so on. You know, that's also valid. But the idea is to boost production, agricultural production, in order to have enough to distribute to that. And then, of course, there's the cluster manufacturing idea that's in the APC manifesto, which is also being actioned, especially through the agri-processing zones, that cluster companies will be built in all of these places to capitalize on the things that are grown in those areas, add value for export, not only for local consumption or raw export as you may want it. However, of course, it is also good to get critiques from members of the public so that government can continue to reposition and reassess its policies, because we don't know it all. However, when we get feedback, we're able to fine-tune and do it better. Nigeria will go back to occupying its pride of place even in Africa and beyond. We may have slipped in terms of GDP, but by the time the replacing is done, sometime in January, it's being worked on now, we're going to be back to number one or minimum number two, and we're going to be able to leverage from that point, and of course, still give the promise of the president in terms of achieving a 1 trillion economy a good shot by the year 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tope Fashua, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters, Office of the Vice President. We hope to have you again in a few months and to, you know, do an evaluation of all that we've talked about, considering the fallout of these reforms. Thank you so much for starting the week with us on Business Nigeria. We appreciate this.
Thank you very much.
All right, then, coming up on our show, we would focus again to federal government's drive towards rural electrification and renewable energy sources. Yes, that is what we'll be doing on the